Hey everyone, we're going to be looking at one of the review assignments, Regents Prep number 1. And this just goes through some of the test questions that have been on the Regents before. And we're going to focus mostly on functions and graphing in this video. So, first one we're going to look at is question 3. And then the question, you can kind of read it, but it says value in dollars of a certain car after X years represented by the equation. And they want us to know how much more is the car worth after 2 years than after 3 years. So you can clearly see they try to spell this out for us, but it says here X years, and then it says 2 years and 3 years. So what that means is that we're going to have to put in 2 and 3 for X. And they want to know how much more, so that's going to imply some subtraction. So there's a couple ways you can do this. But generally, if you go ahead and go to y equals, type in the function itself, and that's pretty much status quo with all function questions. Usually getting a picture of the graph and the table will help you with it. So I'm going to put this in, caret symbol, x for the exponent. Now again, there's a couple things I know about this graph already, and hopefully you know those as well. The first thing that I know about this graph is that 25,000 represents the y-intercept, and that's the starting value of the car. Okay, so that's how much the car is worth when it's brand new. And the other part I know is that this is a decreasing exponential function, or in this case, sometimes they call it decay. And this would be a decrease by 0.14, which is 14%. So those are a couple things that I know about this graph. Sometimes they ask about the context of the question. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to the table. Now one of the other functions I have my students use in class is if you go to the mode section and hit G-T, it's going to give you the graph-table option. So when you click on second and graph, what you're going to see is you're going to see the graph if it's visible, and you're going to see the table. So I want to figure out the amounts for 2 years and 3 years. So I go to 2. At 2 years, I have 18,490 from my table. And then I'm going to subtract the amount for 3 years, which is 15,901. And in this case, well, that's going to end up giving me choice A, which is 2,589. But notice that D and C are the answers for those two values. I'm not exactly sure how they got 6,510. I'm assuming right now it's based on the 25,000, which is 0, and the 2 years amount, which was 18,490. But again, these are some of the things that I noticed with these exponential function questions. Sometimes talk about context, or use the function to get actual numbers from the table. Okay. The other thing I want to point out is notice that on the graph there's actually nothing there. Just remember this graph only goes up to 10 in every direction, so 25,000 is obviously not between negative 10 and 10. Alright, so we're going to look at a graph question. So if you take a look at question 6, I'm going to pull up my graphing calculator. Now you'll notice that this is what they call a piecewise function, because you're going to be graphing pieces of two different functions. So the stuff on the left of the comma, that's what's going to be graphed. That's going to go in y equals. And then the inequality notation right here, our interval, that's going to represent the x values that we're going to focus on in the table. So I'm going to put in the first graph, which is the absolute value of x. And to get to the absolute value, you press the math button, go to number, put the x in, the absolute value signs, and then I hit second and graph. Now you're going to see right now, I see a graph, I see a table to go with it. This graph says to go from negative 3 to 1. So if I go to negative 3, I start off with negative 3, 3. So I'll put that point in. I'm going to keep working there until I get to 1. Now at 1, I don't have the equal to part right here. So that means I'm going to have an open circle at 1. I'm actually trying to draw that again. My smartboard's just a touch off right now. Okay, so there's my point for that. So when I draw this, I'm not drawing lines and arrows going out. I'm just drawing that piece. And then the other part says 4. So go back, clear out the first one, put 4 in, second graph again, and again we're focusing from 1 to 8. So I got from here 1, 4. You can see the crosshairs on my graph now. See those crosshairs? That's why I have my students use this function, because now it's saying, okay, 1, 4, 1 to the right, 4 up. So that's going to help me plot each of those points. And then each of those points is going to be a closed circle. It's going to go up to 8, and then I got another segment that I draw. So this is the graph for that question, those two pieces. Now, the last part we're going to look at, the last question, we're going to look at another exponential function question. So if you take a look at 9, and they're asking which expression best fits the data. So now there's a couple ways that you can do this question. You could use stat to input the data, and then notice that the answers are all exponential functions. So in that case, you would have to go to the EXP exponential regression section on the calc part of the calculator. The other way you could do it, well, take a look at the table. You notice that the y values are decreasing, which means that we're going to get rid of b and d right away because those show that that's an increasing function. And then I have 2 to pick from. I could just put these into y equals. I could go to y equals for this and check and see which one makes the most sense. I could take, for example, I could take a, and I would type it in. And just be careful when you type it in. You're not going to put m. You're always going to use x for graphing purposes. Okay. And then, so once you get it in, you can go and check the table again. And again, you might not see a graph of it, but the table is going to be all the values, and that's what we're focused on in the question, is the table they gave us. Okay. So, and with the other questions as you're looking at them, just make sure that you read them carefully. Also, be aware of what they talk about for what the variables represent, because like this one clearly says it, and it does in all the question. Minutes is m, and then t is temperature. So you want to think about what the variables represent in the context of the question as you work through each question on the Regents.